Kashin Koji just got exposed, or did he? Kashin Koji just got folded by a guy hiding inside of a scroll. Not by Jura, not by Shibai, not by some galaxy brain 10-dimensional cosmic god. Kawaki literally got mailed to this guy's hideout like an Amazon package, and Kashin Koji still got taken down by Kawaki in only a matter of seconds once Amado's voice command was issued. And now half the fandom is acting like Kashin Koji got exposed harder than a celebrity's old tweets, and just like that celeb that everybody's rushing to cancel, everybody's rushing to cancel Kashin Koji. The problem is that all the jokes about 10 Directions and Kashin Koji, they don't fully hold up when you pay attention to how 10 Directions works. Because Boruto Tubu Vortex Chapter 35 didn't just make Kashin Koji look weaker or useless like all the memes and the jokes that I've been seeing are saying. Far from it, if we're being honest here. Instead, it made 10 Directions look a lot weaker. And that's exactly a very important distinction that we as a fandom have to make before we jump on Kashin Koji. Join me in today's newest Naruto Explained video where your OBC, your original Boruto Chi, takes a look at why Kashin Koji really went down the way that he did. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to check out the chapter review, which is up on the channel and will be linked in the description box and in the end credits for those you guys who have not seen the review just yet. Also, over on my Everything One Piece Explained channel, my new One Piece video is up, and I do recommend that if you are a fan of One Piece. Both will be linked in the description box and in the end credits for those you guys who may be curious. For months now, fans have treated 10 Directions like it was basically Future Sight from Dragon Ball's Bardock OVA mixed with Doctor Strange looking through 14 million futures and Avengers Infinity War. The assumption became that if Kashin Koji can see possible futures, then he should know literally everything that is about to happen. This leads to everyone saying, yeah, this guy should never be caught off guard. But that's not what the manga has been telling us, and not just recently either. In fact, the manga has been screaming the opposite, going all the way back to when the power itself was first being explained to us. Ever since Kashin Koji explained 10 Directions, there has been one giant disclaimer attached to it. The future is not fixed and the future changes. And every time someone changes the future, 10 Directions becomes less reliable. And once that happens, the information Kashin Koji previously had becomes outdated and it becomes a liability. That's something I've personally always appreciated about power like this, and just this jutsu in particular. Once it was explained to us in full detail, it made the power something a lot easier to swallow, and it allowed for moments like what we just got in this chapter to more easily transpire. The irony here is that the fandom is getting mad at Kashin Koji for something that Koji himself warned us about multiple times. It's like being mad when someone tells you that Kaguya is stronger than any version of Madara, despite the manga literally telling us that Madara is way below Kaguya from multiple people. Let's start at the beginning. When Kashin Koji first began guiding Boruto as a singularity of fate, the entire strategy revolved around making small adjustments to future events. Not giant changes, not any timeline nukes, just small changes. The reason is quite simple. Koji was not trying to create a completely different future. He was trying to slowly navigate the tiny handful of futures where Jura could eventually be defeated. He stressed this very much so, even more so, once it became clear that Boruto would only take unsealing Sasuke as a acceptable future, despite Kashin Koji warning Boruto that unlike every other future he saw, this one was the most dangerous one and the most turbulent future that they could ever go down, because nearly every outcome that Kashin Koji saw resulted in Boruto dying. Think of it like having a GPS. If you're driving to Houston and you accidentally miss your turn, which anybody that's down there in Texas knows exactly what I mean about the interstate system. Holy shit, I do not like driving in Texas. But say you accidentally miss your turn, your GPS will recalculate. No big deal. But if you suddenly decide you're going to drive to California instead, the entire route becomes useless and it's going to try to reroute you continuously. But as long as you are continuing to drive towards California, the directions to Houston become irrelevant and useless. That is what happened to Kashin Koji. The route has changed, and then it changed again, and then it changed again. And guess what? It changed again. Now he's just going blind for the most part. He knows and remembers the old route, but that information, it is outdated now. Just like that driver being told to get off at an exit, say whatever, to go towards Houston 150 miles back. That exit no longer matters because you are too far removed from it to be able to go down that path. During the Mamushi battle, Kashin Koji outright tells us that they're in a situation where things have already diverged from what he originally saw. The warning, that was warning number 1. That was a small warning, but a warning nevertheless. But people look past it because the end result was what you wanted. Mamushi died. Mission accomplished. And then chapter 34 happened. Ko didn't show up when he was supposed to. Koji was clearly spooked about that outcome, and yet he still took the time out to lay out to Boruto all the possible outcomes based on the old information he had. Because at least, hey, Ko wasn't on the battlefield, but his motives were going to stay the same, so they could still navigate as needed. But that was all based on old information. He just adjusted it to account for what just happened. Because again, 10 directions isn't so much as seeing the future as it's set in stone, so much as it's taking snapshots of the future. You're retaining that information and you're using probabilities to factor in everything you saw, and then you are game planning around it. That was warning number 2, and that one got a little bit louder. Then chapter 35 comes along, and Kashin Koji practically grabs the audience by the shoulders and starts shaking them really hard. If the previous moments were subtle hints, escalating but subtle hints, then this one was an outright rubber stamp on the head saying, pay attention to me. Because Amado approaching him via a no gene in that scroll, it wasn't part of any future that Kashin Koji saw. He never saw Amado walk up to Inojin in any timeline. Koji outright tells us this information in the chapter. He's seen every possible outcome, including the timeline where Rock Lee becomes relevant in the manga and he's not lost on the path of life alongside his equally irrelevant son, Metal Lee. Kashin Koji saw those timelines, but he didn't see this one happening. None, not one. That means the timeline branches have become massive. The further that you drift away from reality, the further that you drift away from the reality of those futures that you're looking at, the less valuable those observations become. Imagine studying for a math test only to show up and discover that the teacher is handing out a history exam instead. That's basically what happened to Kashin Koji. The information he prepared is no longer able to match the current reality, and that's why this isn't a plot hole. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It's a payoff to limitations that were established from the moment the 10 Directions was introduced. The crazy part is that Ikimoto was shown setting this up before it happened, meaning that he did put thought into this. In fact, if Kashin Koji had perfectly predicted all this before it happened, that would have been a potential plot hole, because it would completely contradict everything that we've been told about changing timelines, and in particular how unsteady they are. For my foodies, to use another example to make sure that we're fully connecting here, it's like cooking a thin slice of meat. You pick the meat, just a super thin slice of meat. Too much heat and you're basically eating jerky, and too little heat and you might want to ask your mother if she secretly gave birth to a vampire and never told anybody. If that makes you hungry, it's because as I'm scripting this, I'm getting ready to go into the kitchen in order to cook dinner, so hashtag big meaty meat. Now let's talk about the trap itself, because I think that's probably what most of you guys clicked on this video for. That's why I have the thumbnail like it is, because the trap was a really big deal. And honestly, I do feel like Amado cooked. It's something I started to go further in detail with on the chapter review, but since that was so far into the review, I said, well, hold on, I'll just take my notes from this and I'll make a separate video on it to make sure that we really get this hammered on. So I don't really think that he's getting enough credit for what he did in this chapter, because it might have been because it was a setup chapter and so much of it was a dialogue heavy chapter, and dialogue heavy chapters tend to not go over very well in this fandom. I think when you take a step backwards, This is right up there with Shikamaru tricking Ko by using Amado as bait in order to lure the guy out. It happened so quickly, but unlike Shikamaru, Amado left no room for error here, at least when it came to securing Kashin Koji. That, my friends, was brilliant. That, my fellow Naruto scholars, that was brilliant. Amado didn't attack Kashin Koji directly. He weaponized two very important things, trust and curiosity, two things that are some of the most universal and dangerous parts of being human. We as humans naturally want to trust others. Before we get jaded by the world, we trust in other people. Even when we don't fully trust somebody after becoming jaded, in the deepest corner of our mind, there is always that one belief, that one brief thought of what if they're telling the truth. But then logic typically overrules unless you are either super naive or you have some past history that can be exploited, or, as was, I would argue, the case with Kashin Koji here, you're just arrogant enough to think, whatever it may be, I can handle it. From Kashin Koji's perspective, you cheated death fighting a god. So what is a four-eyed geezer to you? Turns out he was everything that you aren't currently, because one is Sleepy Time and the other one is auditioning for a live action Bill Cosby role. Unfortunately for Kashin Koji, in this round of method acting, he is the blonde female in this scenario. He used Inojin. He used information. He used timing. He used trust. The other dangerous thing that we as humans have. For a time, Kashin Koji trusted in Amado, his literal creator. That trust led to him being betrayed. That trust made Inojin look like a dumbass also. Now he's the one that's been bitten in the behind for the second time. It's like that story about the scorpion and the frog. Kashin Koji in the situation just happens to be the frog. More importantly, Amado used Koji's own assumptions against him. He correctly deduced that Koji would take that scroll and just wait to open it later, because if the info was valuable, he could use it to formulate a plan based on whatever he sees when he gets his next 10 Directions update. Amado heard how that power works because Inojin, which again, Dunce Hat, kept their private channel open when Kashin Koji was explaining everything to Inojin, and Amado heard it. Amado recognized that weakness, and as a scientist, having access to information like that, if he could bring Koji into the fold or take control of him, it will provide him everything moving forward when it comes to his science. Again, as a scientist, you can't beat knowing what every possible variable is going to be. Amado saw his opening and he exploited it immediately. This is why I've always said Amado is one of the most dangerous people in Boruto, despite looking like he can probably not run half a mile without being winded, and with how much this man smokes, that's being very generous. You have a better chance of telling Choji to go on a 30-day water fast. It ain't happening. The man does not win with power. He wins with preparation and that big brain of his. Everybody else, they walk into a battle, they're carrying weapons, they're carrying ninjutsu, they're carrying just a good old-fashioned set of guts. Amado walks into a battle carrying contingency plans and a lot of patience. He waited for years to take down Ishiki Otsutsuki after all. It's something that I really give Amado credit for. It's one of the reasons why, even though I've been calling him sus for the last 6 years, I gotta give the guy his props. I do respect a character like this. It's part of why Aizen is one of my favorite Bleach characters. I respect characters who can plan ahead like this and adjust when things pop up that are unexpected. I like that because it's a life lesson for you listening to this video. There's no such thing truly as luck. There's preparation meets opportunity. When you plan ahead like this, when something unexpected pops in your way, if you're prepared, you can make adjustments because you're not fully caught off guard. And with somebody like Amado, those contingency plans are often far more dangerous than you might think on the surface level. The one thing that Koji absolutely deserves, though, is criticism for accepting anything from Amado in the first place. Like, seriously. This is like agreeing to meet your toxic ex alone in a parking lot at midnight because she said she wanted closure, despite knowing that she has daddy issues, and she said that you reminded her of her daddy, which definitely makes things awkward when she calls you daddy, but instead you decide to go anyway because that voice in your head says, maybe there's still a chance to make things right. Maybe we can run it back. No, absolutely not. Run, sprint, call an Uber, make a deal with Crowley if you have to. Do something, just don't get in that car. If it sounds oddly specific, it's because it absolutely is. Here's the thing, Amado is basically every red flag you can imagine wrapped into one person. This man creates cyborgs in secret, manipulates everyone around him. He constantly makes messes on purpose just to swoop in with the solution and take credit for it. Amado lies constantly and somehow always has another backup plan hidden behind the backup plan and a lie to explain the other lie, and somehow manages to tell it in a way that you end up believing. If Amado showed up on a dating app, his profile picture would be a warning label. So yes, Amado definitely tricked Kashin Koji. Kashin Koji made a mistake. There's no getting around that. It's why I had the channel artist draw the thumbnail in the way that we decided to draw the thumbnail. But even here, the manga is giving us context. Koji wasn't planning to immediately open that scroll. He specifically intended to wait for another 10 Directions update first. That means he was still exercising caution. It means in the back of his mind somewhere, he was looking at Amado the way that Shikamaru looks at Amado every time he breathes air. Somehow, it was part of Amado's plan and he doesn't fully trust him. The problem was that Amado acted faster than Koji expected, and that's important because it highlights something the fandom keeps overlooking. Koji didn't lose because he's stupid. He lost because Amado found the narrow window where 10 Directions was weakest. He got between him and the updates, and Amado just made a calculated guess that it was currently that moment in time. This serves a much bigger purpose in the story, because the more weaknesses that 10 Directions reveals, the more impressive Shibai becomes. Remember, Kashin Koji's not Shibai. He's borrowing a fragment of Shibai's power. That's a huge difference. It's like comparing somebody using a calculator to somebody who invented mathematics. Koji has access to that ability. Shibai mastered it. And in chapter 35, it reinforces that distinction, because every limitation we see from Kashin Koji, it becomes indirect hype for Shibai. Koji needs updates. Shibai quite literally wouldn't. Koji struggles with those branching timelines. Shibai wouldn't. Koji sometimes has gotten overwhelmed. Shibai absolutely wouldn't. The story is showing us the ceiling of a borrowed power. The more you see people like Damon use their Shinjutsu, the more it upscales Shibai. The story is showing us that you can raise Shibai's presence without actually having to see him on the screen. And Boruto as a story has done that a lot. And when you look at the Buddhism parallel here, there's a lot of symbolism, because this reunion with Koji and Amado, it wasn't random, and it's not just because of what Ishiki said in Boruto Part 1. Instead, it's also a poetic one, because Amado is a character that created Kashin Koji. Kashin Koji is a character that is defined by escaping fate. Amado, to a degree, could be viewed as a father figure because he gave birth to Koji. He's the creator, the architect of his very existence, and yet Koji ultimately rebelled against him. He broke away, he chose his own path. But now, after all these timeline changes, after all the chaos over the last 3 years, Koji's journey brings him right back to the person that he originally escaped from, because Amado's the whole reason why Kashin Koji even faced Ishiki to begin with. In Buddhism, there is often a discussion about karmic cycles. Not karma in the internet sense, not karma as in the karma seal. Karma as in unfinished causes and consequences. Lessons that remain unsolved. People who continue to cross paths because something between them remains incomplete. Koji and Amado, they fit that pattern perfectly. Their relationship never truly ended. It was just interrupted. And now the story is forcing them back together. For what? We have to wait and see. But it might not be as creator and creation or master and student. It might be two people whose destinies are still tangled together by things that we don't know just yet. And that's what makes this upcoming reunion potentially one of the most important conversations in the entire Boruto story. And it just makes sense that this next chapter will be the last chapter of this manga volume. So I'm expecting something big here, because the man who created Kashin Koji is finally about to face the man that Kashin Koji ultimately became. And if there's one thing that Boruto loves doing, is turning old relationships into entirely new battles. It's a series that loves reframing dynamics. Look no further than the dynamic between Boruto and Kashin Koji. Koji didn't get exposed. 10 Directions did. And Amado just exploited the weakness. Which means that the further this story moves forward, the less anyone truly really knows about what's going to come next. Obviously, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, click here on the left to check out the chapter review, or click here on the right to check out that video for my Everything One Piece Explained channel.